laugh. I already feel like I'm trying to cover up for the fact that you put me laugh. I'm trying to distract, you know?
So I want you to do me a favor. I work in a creative youth development program. So a lot of this and like keeping sixth graders awake, that kind of stuff. You're my sixth graders. If you'll do me a favor, and we're going to take a breath together to invite you back into the room with me. So find yourself in a body already breathing, secure by a chair supported by the earth. Very nice. And we're going to do a four-part breath or a square breath. So if you'll trust me, you can close your eyes. If you don't, that's fine. We're just going to breathe in together with the maximum ability of your lungs for 4 seconds, for 4 sides. And it's going to go like this. In, hold, release. Hold. In, hold, release, hold. Now at your own pace. There you go. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Very intimate for me, and it also calms my nerves, so trick's on you. So can I see a show of hands, and not middle school hands? If you were able today, when we were asking questions in pairs, to actually go back to a neighborhood that formed you, that you had some good memories of a neighborhood, right? Okay. Will you share with me if you are currently privileged enough to have a neighborhood like that you're really proud of, that you got neighborhoodliness going on? Okay, excellent. Look around. And if you're willing, share with me if you do not have that neighborhood you heard about. You currently don't have it. You didn't have it growing up, and you're just now forming it in your head what it could be. Anybody with me? Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So I want you to choose. See, I move this way. We're here. Okay. I want you to choose one, right? Some of us, if you had a neighborhood growing up, I want you to go back to that place with me. So take your memory out. If you are living in a current neighborhood, please show up for us. How did you do that? I want you to think about what you see. And if you don't have that memory, you don't have that current situation, but you do know that it could be something, and you're starting to hear those sparks from other people here, that's where you're going to live with me right now. We're going to do a little exercise that I like to do. It's one way to get to a I am from poem, and if you're a creative person, you've been around teachers, language arts teachers, creative writers, you might understand what an I am from poem is, and I will share mine, but go back to that neighborhood, and I would like you to close your eyes, because you're building a memory, and it's helpful not being stimulated by the speaker in the front of the room. When you're in your neighborhood, when you're stepping out your door into that neighborhood, what do you hear? And I invite you to throw it at me. Put it in the air. Put it in the room. Let's build this together. What do you hear?
Other kids laughing.
Birds chirping.
Birds chirping. Music.
On bus.
Ooh.
Basketball.
Basketball.
Lawnmowers.
Lawnmowers.
Ice cream man.
Oh, the ice cream man. Excellent. You guys are good at this. Okay, now, neighborhood time. What do you taste?
Garlicky salad.
Water from the hose.
Yeah.
Ooh, yes.
Ice cream sandwiches.
Ice cream sandwiches. What do you smell? Barbecue. Hey, Texas.
Cedar.
Cedar. Grass.
Grass. Sweat.
Sweat. Yes.
Rain.
What did you feel in your hands, or under your feet, or against your skin?
The sun.
Mm-hmm.
Heat.
Dirt.
Grass.
Bark.
Bark. Now, what do you see?
Sidewalks. Swing set. Friends. Extended family.
Blue sky.
Now open your eyes. Thank you. What a beautiful neighborhood we just built, right? That's really nice. I was asked, I was lucky enough to come to the Family Foundation through a capacity building cohort for the nonprofit that I work for. If you are from San Antonio, or if you work in youth development, you may have heard of a nonprofit called SAYC, San Antonio Youth, yes, SAYC. And I'll talk a little bit about that just to give you context, but I did want to introduce myself separate from work first. My name is Nicole Amri Vasquez, and I am from art and food and music and ambition and faith. I am from a desire to learn and improve and love. I am from resilience. I am from San Antonio, Texas. I grew up in families deep-rooted in different parts of the West Side, a historically dense and segregated area of our city. The differences in my paternal grandparents and my maternal grandparents eerily spoke to the history of this beloved and sometimes notorious side of town, a history that I'm still discovering today. With Bandera Road serving as the proverbial tracks, my father's family was from Mexico and from the Southwest, from young motherhood, from street smarts, from rosaries and cookouts, from fighting, from reputation, from self-medicating, and from making ends meet, from the courts. My mother's family, from Spain and Mexico, from church every Sunday and Wednesday, and Bible study after school and all summer long, from hush, disguised, and forgotten curanderismo, from the board of this or that district and social circles, from owning businesses and running for city council, from status and perception, from ranch homes. This I know to be the outside perspective, of course, the perspective of a very mixed identity, but a deep pride in my city. And so with a little bit of, thank you for letting me tell you my I Am From poem, not as lively and touchy-feely as y'all's. Y'all's was really good. But this is a history that's I'm having to piece together from oral histories. Not from books, not from a class, not from any Texas history that was decent. It's from the people I work with, from adults who dared tell the truth, or their version, their exaggerated and fun version, right? And so when they asked me to answer this question, I was lucky enough to have, from the cohort, been asked something similar. I was sitting with David Rogers, and I don't know if y'all are lucky enough to know David Rogers, but he helps run, thank you, he helps run the HEB Family Foundation, and he asked, really poignant question, if you had $1 million, what would you do to support young people and the trajectory and social mobility of families? And I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. He's like, oh, by the way, tell your story too. So I'm doing this and I'm digging. And then I realized neighborhoods. You fix neighborhoods and you have these ponds of resources and love for the school. My passion is in education. I work as an artist. I'm an artist first and then an educator second. And that's what we do at SAYC. We build community, we build neighborhood. Our mission is to ignite the creative power of young people as forces of positive change in the world, with an emphasis on marginalized communities. And they can only do that, I can only fulfill my mission, if they have a place to live, if they're fed, if they're healthy, if I know that they're going home to a family that knows how to support them or knows the resources. So my job very much is way beyond our doors. And that's where all of you come in. And so what I hope for and what I mourn is you guys. What I grew up with were people who cared and shared, with potlucks, with saying, I have this to offer. Does anybody have that? And it's just this beautiful thing that I see all of you, and as I learn your stories, I know that you're doing. And I miss that from growing up at Easter when the neighbors would get together, you know, and where there was food, and there was the ice cream, and lots of adults caring, not just my lonely parents. And so you guys are what I hope for, so that you continue to build those neighborhoods that you remember. And for those of us who raised our hands because we don't currently have that you reach out and that you give us space to have the courage to offer what we got, right? And that's all. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea. Everybody calls me Andy. So I feel like we're getting pretty familiar, right? So you can call me Andy. So when I receive this question, what do I mourn and what do I hope for? At first reading, I thought, I can answer that. For my neighborhood, for my community, that's easy. And as I thought more about it, the question became more difficult for me to answer, both of them. What do I hope for? What do I mourn for? What do I even consider my neighborhood to be? What and who is part of my community? And whose communities am I a part of? Where do I belong? For those of you who are familiar with the Enneagram, I'm a 6. So, so one simple question or two simple questions that you just heard can spin into several different directions for me, many, until I have to stop it and put my finger on how I decide that I want to answer. So here's what I decided. I want to talk about where I'm from and what I mourn and what I hope for without the rose-colored sort of glasses of nostalgia. Because yesterday, to be quite honest, hasn't always been better. And sometimes what seemed better only needed to be scratched just a little bit below the surface to reveal something entirely different. And often, when I was thinking about what I mourn, what I figured out was that what I mourn never actually existed. And so the mourning comes in missed opportunities for great or small strides towards what I want, and what that is justice. So, bear with me as I sort of go through this writing that I was doing earlier, and maybe if you have a question or two afterwards, I can get to it. So, first I'll start with language. The indigenous in me mourns language that matches my skin, the opportunity to make sense of sounds that connect me to ancestors and land I don't remember existing without wire and lines in the sand. I mourn losing my colonizer language, born of mestizaje, maybe a forced mixing of things, a first language my tongue sometimes forgets. I mourn missing pages in history books where people who look like me shine and spark pride into the eyes of young and hungry readers who then grow up knowing they belong, that they always have belonged. The L in the LGBT community member in me mourns the loss of spaces I recognize, pink triangles and neon signs that signaled me and my kind were welcomed here. Sometimes progress can feel like erasure. I mourn dingy taco land and clanging drums I could hear from my porch. I see houses sold and lots morph into condos and wonder, who on earth are those for? I mourn courts gone that I never lived in, watch children move and support systems broken, and I mourn that they may never return and I may never see them again. And maybe most of what I mourn right now is having a leader who watches their words, who knows, and who cares deeply that children are listening. That's what I mourn. But I also have hope. And the hope part didn't get written into some sort of poem or anything. But this is what I hope for. I hope for empathy between people. which is, I guess, what we're trying to build here. I hope for solutions where no one is left out. I hope for student loan forgiveness. I'm not kidding. I hope for the continuation of building collective power, built from love. I hope for accountability and for remembrance. That's what I hope for. So before I go, I want to ask you what you hope for. And so if everyone will just take 10, maybe 20 seconds, and I'll be quiet, and think about what you hope for. And then I'll ask one or two of you to share. Who has something to share that they hope?
I hope for our daughters to rule wisely.
I made space for 3. So we'll sit here silently until somebody would like to say the next thing they hope for.
I hope for an equitable balance in our community.
I hope we heal from past and continuing trauma.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me share.
Hello. Hi. My name is Secunda from Houston. So, what I mourn. I think about when I had the opportunity to visit Ghana, which is a country located on the coast of West Africa. And on this trip, I visited what some folks call a castle, some call a dungeon. And in this dungeon was where they held folks who were enslaved. And most of us, we know this. But I think when I visited that space, what surprised me was everything that was happening around. Like, I never imagined that it was a city so close. This town called, one of the spaces I went was near this space called Elmina. Elmina, you can see because the Portuguese had built like buildings and things were happening, right? So there were other Black people, there were other people of African descent that were being colonized, but they were living, they were moving. The Portuguese, and then the Spaniards, and then the British, right? They were living, they were moving. And in that space where the world was happening, there were people who were being raped. There were people who were being stripped from their families. There were people who were getting taken through this process of being dehumanized, being enslaved, right? Being churched, being Christianized, being baptized in a dungeon. And I think that was, although I was my family, we talked about, because I know I couldn't have learned it from school, right? So my parents and my family, we talked about history and things that happened. But I guess, I minored in African studies when I went to college for the little time I was there. But I never imagined that this went on like this, right? And I thought to myself, like, well, what were the other people doing? And so I mourn that like, I didn't know, but there is really not a lot of change, right? There are people every day sitting in prisons. There are people every day that have been stripped from their families. There are people every day there because they don't have bail money to get out. They're there because of poverty, because it's criminalized. They're there because of a drug, one time crack, cocaine that was poured into their communities. They're there for all sorts of reasons. And I mourn the fact that the very people who sit in the prisons, the very people who are in contact with our criminal justice system, their tax dollars pay for the systems, their tax dollars pay for the jails. As a matter of fact, in predominantly Black and brown communities, like, their tax dollars, we're the ones getting pulled over, right? Be it for a traffic ticket or for not having insurance or for you name it, right? I'm more in the fact that in many metropolitan cities and probably others, about 40% of a lot of the budget goes to police. I mourn that. I mourn that with all the things that we can do with the pot that we put in together, right? We all put in this pot, no matter how much you make. Like when you're buying your cigarettes, when homeless folks are buying their cigarettes, like those taxes, they all go into this pot. But the decision has been made that we would interfere into folks' life, right, when there's time for punishment. I mourn that. I mourn that. Where is the interference when it's time when people are hungry? Where's the interference when folks need education? Where is the interference when there's a mental health issue, right? I mourn that that's the way we choose as a community, that's the way it's chosen. I mourn the fact that the power doesn't come from my community, right? That's really not what I chose. That's not what we ever chose. I mourn the fact that my freedom is tied up in y'all freedom. Why? I mourn that. And I hear people say it like that's a cool thing. I mourn that I have to wait to be liberated until somebody who looks at me and who looks at my community like they're not human to feel like, oh, now you should be liberated. I mourn the fact that criminalization is based on race. I mourn that. I mourn that no matter what has happened, the wonderful things that, news reports have written about. So in Houston, if you have a minor infraction, so there has been some changes in bail, right? But it hasn't changed the makeup of the jail system, right? We elected judges that represent us, right? A lot of Black women judges. It hasn't changed the system. I'm more in the fact that we've had so many wins, but there's always the system just changes and it flips and it operates the way it was meant to exist. I'm more in the fact that people don't acknowledge that that is the truth. It's not, this is how it exists. I'm more in the fact that there is so much creativity and power coming from communities that people think they have to save, right? But people don't accept that wealth of knowledge if it's not dressed up, if it didn't go through academia first, right? If it doesn't look right. I'm more that when there is power to change and create, those dollars are sent out of the community for other people to come in and act like they have a solution to a problem that they know nothing about, people that they don't understand, right? One more thing. What gives me hope is opportunity of an exodus from my mourning. What gives me hope is organizations that's creating ways of freedom. I'll give one quick because I took too much time up. But there's an organization that we partner with sometime called NBUF, National Black United Front. And one of these partnerships, one of the things that we were able to do was become people patrol, right? So meaning that we patrol our own communities with love. There's some dope boys on the corner and they ain't bothering nobody. We ain't got no problem with you. But can you make sure whatever you do not hurt this community, right? Can you make sure these corner stores that are within the community that treat people as if they're not human, you're gonna close down if you don't respect us, right? You keep selling this trashy food, right? This molded food. I celebrate the fact that there's opportunity from within our own communities that we can create ways of freedom, ways of liberation, even within a space that, I don't know, there's hope to exit. And there's hope to create something outside of or inside of what already exists.
Wow. Secunda, thank you. That was incredible. I'm Dacrie Brooks, and about 2 weeks ago, I wrote a personal essay, and I thought that it would be easier for me to share that essay instead of reading it, to kind of give you like the real version of myself with that essay. So what I'm mourning for the kids in these neighborhoods, not just the east side, not just the west side, south side, neighborhoods across the country. These kids are so strong. And so my story, I feel like there are a lot of kids that may be going through what I went through. And so I'm hoping that I'll be able to share this story with some kids. So, confused, abused, shuffled about, shrunken, stretched, etched in the corner of my memory, remains the pain that haunts me to this day. This day, unlike any other, my mother cries, screams as she's punched, beaten, kicked, as she licks drops of blood from her lips. A busted jaw, flaws weren't permitted. It wasn't going down like that. Nobody was around like that. I'm only 11. Praying that God in heaven come down and save us before we drown. My grandma taught me how to pray, but on this day, hope was gone. Paralyzed by fear, I lay there, but standing still, holding my hands over my ears, scared, running. There was no place to go, no escape into a place of safety. Her pride, her honor, she couldn't ask for help. Assistance, a resistance, a fight to escape the world we lived in. So I was 11 on the east side, and we moved to Virginia Beach when I was 12. And that was the first time that I came out of brown and black worlds to all white community. So last week I was reading, and there's this author of this book, and he talked a little bit about if racism were cancer, and I wanted to go with that thought, so I wrote this. If racism were cancer, we probably wouldn't hesitate to say it doesn't discriminate. If racism were cancer, we would probably admit and submit to the thought it only gets exacerbated when it's hidden, disguised, under scrutinized. If racism were a cancer, we wouldn't be so complicit. In fact, we'd be more explicit, more loud, and call out this cloud of darkness, heaviness that covers us in trauma, transgressions, and obsessing over who's right, what's wrong, and why. If racism were a cancer, couldn't we all agree that cancerous lumps are always deemed dangerous? And when they spread like spores on old moldy bread, we all pay the price. If racism were a cancer, it would apply to us the humans, black, white, and brownish, and all up aroundish. It's not just you, me, or we. It's us and our history. Snoop would tell us, all of us, just not Gail, that we are straight tripping, slipping into denial if we can't see the inequity, identity, the challenge, and socioeconomic imbalance that haunts us in every moment. If racism were cancer, you wouldn't be so down to crown me inferior, rank high as superior. Would it have to be so subliminal? If I were walking around in the store, would you think me a criminal? Subliminally telling yourself we couldn't break bread at your table out in public, no big deal. But behind closed doors, now that's a different deal. If racism were a cancer, you stop, drop, and quit giving me your leftovers. That would be over. But for real, my ingenuity would just keep on pressing. I've made them into 5-course meals. So for me, the story is that when I went to Virginia, that was the first time I actually realized racism existed. I had no idea. I was in my brown and black space with all of my people having fun. Even though life at home was hard, as you know, I was still able to be resilient, still able to rise above. And there's so many stories of kids out there who do this every day. They're strong, they're resilient, they have voices. And it's not all about the choices that they make. Like Secunda said, choices are made for people. And so what I mourn for are those people that have voices. And I say those people, I mean all people, right? But particularly the kids of color in the communities that have voices that are teaching people daily new things. What I hope and what gives me hope is this. These people right here, y'all people, our people, the community, right? Having these conversations, being together, coming together, working together, breaking bread together, laughing together, having fun together, mourning together, lamenting together, building each other, loving each other, spending time with one another. That's what I hope for. That's what I love. Thank you.
I mourn the fact that I have to follow these amazing ladies. I hope for your grace as I close out our time of sharing stories. I did want to thank my dear friend Patton for his heart to bring us all together. I think without his love for us and his investment in relationships and wanting to see change, that this would not be possible. So I am so grateful for you as a friend and for the work that you do. My story, I was talking to someone earlier just about if you had a checklist of characteristics of privilege, and you sort of had to start checking boxes, and it would be white, and it would be male, and it would be hetero, and it would be private education, and then you had the last box that said all of the above. That would be my life. That I would have every advantage and every power and every privilege. And the guilt that comes from that now realizing that came not only at a cost to so many, but that it was also created by my life and my story, that I would like to offer my apologies, especially to you, Michelle, as you go through this and with your church family, that you are one that has grace, that you realize that there's people like me that need to be free, that people in this room would realize that it's people like me that you continue to persevere and you continue to have conversations and you continue to do the work. My apologies and my thanks go out to each and every one of you, because you are the true heroes and you are the ones with the true stories that need to be heard. But for whatever reason, people like me getting put in positions to share stories. And so I humbly submit to try to honor you in the struggle that I can only observe and never truly understand or experience, because my life was not difficult growing up. My life was filled with success. It was not filled with joy. It was not filled with happiness. It was not filled with things of meaning. But from a worldly perspective, I had everything I could want, until I ultimately realized that I had nothing, that I had nothing to offer, that I had nothing that was worthwhile. And I do thank God for that grace, that guilt that I sort of used to operate out of, like with Patton, that we struggle with where we come from at times, that God is, I think, turning it into something good. To be in a position, to be an ally, to be an advocate, to be an activist for the voices that need to be heard, that is the true calling that I believe God has created me for. So I do thank those of you who have recognized my wife and I for the work that we're doing so far, but I also want to point to that if there's anything good that you might see or hear from us, that is truly God working in and through us, because left to my own devices, I was the one that created this system that we all so adamantly seek to destroy and to dismantle. But God in his goodness led me from this place of privilege to this place of purpose, to this place of now true joy on the east side of San Antonio. As we moved our family from Stone Oak down to the east side, when we were checking boxes on scriptures, I would have checked that box that you would sell everything and give it to the poor, and that we've moved in to learn and to love and to try to understand. And so we do ministry on the east side of San Antonio, but I would more phrase it that the east side of San Antonio does ministry on me. That it's this place where we've learned to belong, and we've learned to create community, and we've learned to try to understand and become one together. We would say that we're this ministry of presence rooted in a relationship to create a beloved community, and that sounds good, but the reality of it is so challenging and so difficult as you sit in solidarity and you experience suffering and you see the racism and you see the hurt and you see the hate. Being 5 to 6 years in, I can only celebrate both Patty and Rod for a 50-year commitment to a cause and a community. It's just unbelievable, the work that you guys have done, and I'm so inspired. But in particular, this morning, I was tremendously moved by Miss Olga and her poetry, and how it spoke about the river that we've all sort of joked about driving in on, and she talked about that you would wash the dirt from my soul. But that's the east side for me. That this community is washing the dirt from my soul. It's washing my blind spots and my biases and my bigotry and my prejudice and all these things that I never had to even worry about, never had to see, because I had such privilege I could choose not to. That this community that so many people look down upon, and yes, there's brokenness, and yes, there's hurt, and yet it's this thing that heals me, that's helping to heal me, that's washing the dirt from my soul. And the reality and the transformation of who I must become, this must happen before I can ever hope in what my neighborhood actually could become. That it's this transformation that I must undergo before I can ultimately fulfill any hope or dream that I might have for my current community and the kids that we love and serve. Because like Michelle said, there's this mutuality, there's this interdependence that we need to embrace and that needs to take place, that we would move from something that looks more like charity to stand more in solidarity, that there's a oneness that God would create among us. And so when I talk about my hopes for the east side, I talk about my son and my grandchildren who would be able to live in this beloved community filled with hope and love, where generational curses would become generational blessings. But my mourning for the east side lies in knowing my son, who we were given by God through an adoption, but he is black and he will face the oppressive and racist system that unfortunately and originally I helped to create. That his experience as he's pulled over by a police officer will not be the same as mine, that I would have to fear for his life. But that I could hope that at some point and at some time that we would all see the image of God in each and every one of us, that we would not only say that all men are created equal, that we would all be treated as equal. My hope for the east side is that one of the kids that we now love and lead would grow and to take things to places that we could only dream. But my mourning for the East Side is feeling that although we are working hard to change things for these kids and this community, that people are ultimately more concerned with it looking good than being good. In another talk that I was able to share with my friend Michelle, she talked about this idea of instead of trying to break this broken system, that we would opt out and create a new one. That sometimes to truly change things, you have to create something new. I believe that this is what Jesus talked about when he talked about the kingdom of heaven, that we would be able to sort of opt out of this broken system and to create a new one. And I think that's what this is about. It's creating a new community. It's creating a new kingdom. It's where we all could sit at the table. And if the table wasn't big enough, we would build a new one. But ultimately, my hope for the East Side is that it would maintain all the things that make it beautiful as people try to fix what is broken. And through the poetry and the reflection this morning, my mourning for the East Side is believing and maybe knowing that the place that washes the dirt from my soul is being destroyed, and despite my fight, there's nothing I can do about it. Thank you.